What is happening, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Crossed Up. I'm Bob Wankel alongside Anthony Sanfilippo, and we are doing this on video. So if you're listening to this, in your car or somewhere else, I can see Anthony now as we talk. And so I'm not just talking into a blank screen. And he does not look thrilled this morning. And I don't know if that has anything to do with the baseball team or if there's something else going on or what. But I have to tell you, I don't know. I think we're going to get a saucy Anthony Sanfilippo here in this latest episode.
Yeah, I think so, Bob. What has happened since we last spoke? And it's been a week, and I know we promised everybody that we would do 2 a week, but I guess we didn't know that there were some company meetings that were taking place at the end of the week that precluded us from being able to record following the Thursday debacle as we had originally planned. But since we've last spoke, they lose 2 games to the Texas Rangers, which were an absolute embarrassment. They blow a game that was maybe the worst regular season loss of my lifetime. I mean, I can't think of one where it was more of an embarrassing ninth-inning collapse than it. Now, they've had some where they've come back, which has been fun like that, and you kind of feel bad for the other team a little bit, but I've never seen them blow one like that. Then you have 2 days of misery and in rain and awfulness where you can't even go outside because it's so freaking terrible and cold in May, and come back for a doubleheader on Mother's Day, which is not a great day anyway. And at least they look good in the first one. You're like, all right, fine, that's good. All right, maybe they needed the time off. Harper has the big team meeting. They get the first win, and then they come out in game 2, and you knew it was going to be a bullpen game, so you knew it was going to be a little bit of a challenge. But if there was ever a game where you needed a lineup to come through, that would be it. And they looked as disinterested a lineup as I have seen. Even more so Bob, even more than the last few years where we say it's frustrating and you watch them play and how come they can't hit. They were only down a couple runs at a couple times in this game, and they just kind of went up there like, meh, we're going to chalk this one up.
So last time we talked, we thought they had 6 games ahead at home, 2 with the Rangers, 4 with the Mets. Hey, 4-2 would be good. At the very least, you have to split. Then obviously 6 games becomes 5 games, and they go a whopping 1-4. They've still only won 2 series this season, and you talked about it. It is a shame that we were not able to record on Friday morning because, you'd be a little bit hotter in the moment following that debacle on Thursday night. That was an all-timer. And when you consider the context, needing a win, off to a slow start, you come out, you're playing great baseball, you get the game you need from Aaron Nola, and to lose that game to that team in that situation, yeah, I mean, at the expense of adding some hyperbole to the show here, that may be one of the worst loss in the regular season that I can recall. Truly,
I can't think of one more. The only other one, and that I can even think of that even comes close, and I think this one was worse. You remember a few years back, Hector Neris gave up 3 home runs.
Yeah, to the Dodgers, yes. Out west. But, I mean, you know what? The thing that was with the Hector Neris game was that it was like boom, boom, boom. It happened, and you were out
so
before
fast.
you
Yeah.
never saw it coming.
Yeah, and the other one was it Biggio who hits the home run on Labor Day?
Is that
off
Harry
of Wagner
says, he gives
no.
He gives the line, and he goes, but who? So what? Who cares?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Those are the only 2 that I could even come up with that I thought kind of were as gut-wrenching, tear your heart out, regular season losses in this team, in the history of this team, at least in my lifetime. And the thing that frustrates me the most about it is that, I probably wouldn't have been as hot under the collar on Friday morning maybe as you would be. I probably would have been a little bit more pragmatic about it in the moment, just because I tend to take things, I think, a little bit more
in stride,
big picture, more than individual games in baseball. I have a harder time. I think you can be more. What have you done for me lately, and game by game in other sports? Just because there's less games played in baseball, I think you can kind of get away from. You get no hit. All right, no big deal. You come out and you win the next game. No big deal, kind of thing. Or you have a game like that. You come out and you win the next game. Okay, no big deal. So I maybe in the moment I probably wouldn't have been as upset. I'm more upset about it today than I would have been, I think, on Friday, just because of how it played out since. And yes, there were 2 rainouts in between, and who knows how things would have played if you had your regular starters, if Eflin and Wheeler don't end up on COVID lists, right? I mean, you don't have to start Christopher Sanchez yesterday. So maybe things would have been a little bit different. But nevertheless, that's part of the game, right? I mean, that's part of what makes this – and to not have depth, starting pitching depth, and to hear the broadcasters making fun of it. Like the Mariners called up a prospect yesterday, and they're talking about it in the game. Like, oh, you mean they have starting pitching in the minor leagues? I mean, when they say stuff like that, that's a direct shot.
I kind of put together this show. I said, the last couple times we've just hopped on here and we just went at it. I said, let me try to figure out an outline of how to approach the mess that this is, because this is an absolute mess. And we've already kind of broken off the outline. I never even really gave you an opportunity to follow it. So let's just go ahead, start here. And I guess we can kind of take a chronological approach to this thing. And let's just start quickly with Thursday night. And, the one thing that I will say about Thursday night is that it happened. It was horrible. There were multiple people who contributed to it. And the bullpen obviously was the primary culprit of an epic collapse. However, the Phillies did score 7 runs, I believe, in the first 4 innings of that game, and then went nighty-night for the last 5 innings, really, because then they had to come to the bat in the 9th. So, there's a lot of blame to go around, but anytime you hold a 7-1 lead that late, you have to win the game. It obviously comes back to the bullpen. And just to kind of contextualize further the ridiculousness of that loss and the nature of that loss, I don't know if you saw this or not, but ESPN put out a stat from their research department. The previous 330 times the Mets took a 6-run lead or a 6-run deficit into the 9th inning, they had lost the game. So they were 0-330 when trailing by exactly 6 runs entering the 9th inning. There were certain probabilities that showed that they had 0.1% chance to win that game entering the 9th. And I believe that I saw DraftKings at one point had the Phillies as much as minus 7,000 to win that game on live betting odds. So just an absolute improbable loss, and I still can't understand it even 4 days later. But you hit the nail on the head. It's even worse knowing what we know now. So let's jump into yesterday. And I know that this show is going to be overwhelmingly negative, and there's not much good to say when a team that has this payroll and these expectations are 12-16. They've won 2 series all season long. They are completely disjointed in almost every facet. Again, the offense went almost radio silent yesterday. So let's just get some positives out of the way now. Kyle Gibson outpitched, I think I would say, Max Scherzer.
He did, yes.
Kudos to him. He's been fantastic, sub-3 ERA. Kyle Gibson has been one of the few bright spots of this team so far in the early going.
100%. Not just Kyle Gibson. I mean, when you really look at it, I mean, we talked about, you mentioned Nola briefly, but Nola has put together a string of really good starts. Wheeler, even though he's on the COVID list and he's not quite giving you, the 115 pitch game that he has, that we know he has in him, 120 pitch game that he has in him. He's been really good his last couple of starts. So when you look at that, you say, man, that's 3 guys that are going right now in your starting rotation. I don't know how many teams in baseball can say that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yes, that is a positive. That's a big positive, and it's like the one thing that you can kind of cling to and say, if they're going to figure this out in rapid fashion, that has to be part of the solution.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Aaron Nola now. His last 4 times out, he's gone 25 1/3 innings pitched, and he has allowed a total of 6 earned runs. I mean, he's been really good. And if you even take his season numbers across the board, again, sub-1 whip, 3.38 ERA, and really those first 2 starts were most problematic. So the last 4 times through the rotation, Aaron Nola has really been locked in for a little bit of what I would say a consistent period. You should feel good about that. Zach Wheeler, too, as you noted, has been very good his last few times out. Now, we'll see how long he's out with the COVID situation here. But, again, you can kind of hang your hat on those 2 guys. They're pitching the way that you expected them to pitch. The problem is, and I tweeted this out the other night, actually prior to Aaron Nola's start against the Mets, They are now 2-9 in games started by Zach Wheeler or Aaron Nola, which is insane. I mean, and you could say, well, hey, listen, typically your best guys are going up against other teams' best guys. It's going to be a crapshoot, but you cannot put those two guys out on the mound 11 times and only win 2 games. I mean, there's no wonder, and there are plenty of issues here and plenty of fingers to point, but you have to win when they're on the mound. It's that simple.
And not only that, Bob, you're right. You can usually make that excuse that you're playing against other teams' top guys. And I think with Nola, that's been the case this year. But let's not forget, Zach Wheeler is pitching out of the number 5 spot in the rotation.
And, as the season goes deeper, those matchups tend to get
it changes,
anyway.
right?
Yeah.
But, I mean, who have Wheeler's matchups been against? I mean, he hasn't really pitched against a stud on the other side. And you really look at who he's pitched against.
And we've talked about Aaron Nola on the show. I've been left wanting more from him. I've questioned sometimes that hammer mentality and all of that stuff. But when we say, hey, listen, they're 2-9 when those guys get the ball, I mean, I know that it was a little bit shaky early on. Wheeler the first 3 times through, Nola really the first 2 times through. I'm sorry, at this point, this is about the team and less about the actual pitcher. So, I mean, that is a huge, huge concern. Now, my initial point was about Kyle Gibson. Listen, I'll tell you something else I loved in yesterday's game. Sir Anthony Dominguez comes out late, and he doesn't have it. Like, he can't find it. He's all over the strike zone, and you go, oh, my God. Like, they had this epic collapse the other night. They're going to do it again. They're holding a 1-run lead. I believe it was 3-2. Dominguez comes into the game. There's 2 guys on before you even blink, and you go, he's got nothing. They're cooked. They're screwed. And he bears down and just finds it. And, I mean, just overpowers. And, like, that to me, like, hell yeah, man. Like, that's something to get excited about.
What I thought was good about Dominguez, the one thing about him in that moment, and you're right, I mean, he did bear down. But if you look at those 2 at-bats, he walks the first 2 hitters. He wasn't really missing badly. Like, he was right around the strike zone. And he's like really close. And so you sit there and say, okay, he's not really far off, but he's got to find it quick. And I think that if the third batter didn't go as well as it did, that was probably going to be it for him because they had Alvarado warming up, and you kind of thought he was going to go lefty there right at that point. But Dominguez was able to find it and strike out the side. And really ramped it up. I mean, he found. I mean, obviously hadn't pitched in 4 days, so of course you could throw 98, 99 when you've had that kind of rest. But yeah, I mean, he didn't have it in the sense that he was not pinpoint with his control, but he was not so outrageously wild that you thought, okay, we got to get him the hell out of there. It was one of those ones I was like, okay, let's see, maybe he can find it. So credit the pitching coach there. Caleb Coleman, I guess Girardi too, for letting him keeping him in and let him handle that situation.
And similar to Dominguez was what we saw from Alvarado in the 8th. And again, I know he's a roller coaster. You never know what you're going to get, but he was kind of on the brink of flirting with disaster. He only walked 1, but it was still a 24-pitch inning. There were a couple deep counts that he ran, and again, he was able to bear down, find it, get out of it, and that unfortunately does not necessarily mean anything moving forward because it's like a coin flip every time he enters the game. But in a big spot in a game that they badly needed, especially in the context of knowing what was going to happen in Game 2, and really the way that they were set up in Game 2 with Sanchez taking the ball. Like, the Phillies had to have Game 1 once they got that lead against Max Scherzer. So the only thing I will say, and it's a shame that the expectation has been lowered to this point, but when you look at what the Phillies were entering Sunday with in terms of starting pitching matchups, they could have very easily walked away having lost 2 games. I mean, very easily. Now, that being said, I am not about to excuse what we saw transpire in Game 2. So if you have anything else nice that you want to say about this team, now's probably the time. The only other thing I can really think to kind of bring to the table is you hear the Bryce Harper closed-door players meeting. This doesn't define us. We're going to bounce back. Okay, great. And Bryce Harper did a nice job in Game 1, hits the home run early, sets a tone. They get the second run on a Harper hit. Like, it's great to have meetings, but you got to back it up. And in Game 1, he did that, and it was an important setup. And so, kudos to him. And if we're going to record for an hour today, I think we just got our 2 minutes of positivity out of the way.
Yeah, that was the only other thing I was going to mention. It was Harper, and it was that exact thing. Is that if you're going to be the guy who wants to go hellfire and brimstone in the locker room and say, wake the hell up, we're better than this, then you can't go out there and go 0 for 4 and strike out. You know, I mean, you got to go out there and be that guy, you know, who shows the team, let's go.
Much the way that he did in Game 2.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. But, I mean, hey, Game 1, that was the important one, right? Had to get one. The thing that we've talked about on this show, and I've actually now reached out to a couple different players, and I've gotten conflicting answers from players on this. And I'd be interested to draw in your hockey expertise because I know that you're very plugged in and you've spoken to many players. You know, how real is urgency? How real is playing with fire and energy? And we've had this conversation now multiple times, throughout the last 3 or 4 weeks here about how the Phillies just simply don't demonstrate juice, electricity, urgency on a consistent basis. And I talked to one player, not a Philly, but a current Major League player who's told me that it's nonsense. It's a media-driven narrative that, if anything, you know, guys probably want to do better when things aren't going well. There's a ton of urgency when they get into the box, and then that urgency leads to them pressing. And so when you press and you don't produce, it looks like you have no energy. It looks like you have no juice. And he said that's the reality of it. I talked to another player, current player, who said there's something to it. You show up to the park and you feel it. You know, you say, like, today's our he told me, our fucking day. You know, like, we're going to go get it today. Like, and there's just a certain zip that you have. And, you know, he said, so in that perspective, in that way, it is real. What is your thought on this? Because, I mean, clearly you watch this team and you watch the one runs, getting shut out, just kind of slogging along. And you say they just don't have it, whatever it is.
Bob, you've coached this sport. You know it's contagious, right?
I do. I know that
right? I mean,
for 16 to 18-year-olds.
You know? Yeah, I mean, it's contagious. I mean, seriously, if a team is hitting and you're passing the bat down the line, and you have like big innings, I mean, sometimes that's all it is. It's all kind of like, all right, that guy did it. You know, it's my turn to do it. I don't want to be the guy that lets the team down. I don't want to be the guy that makes the mistake. Like, we're all doing this. We're all pulling this rope together. Like, there is an element to that. Now, it depends on how you break down urgency. I mean, really, when you want to look at it, is there urgency? Different types of urgency. There's an urgency within a game, in a moment, in, you know, in the heat of the battle, so to speak. And I think that urgency is a little bit different from. We've played 27 games. There's 140 left, or whatever, 15 left, whatever it is. And we got to get it right now, or else we're done for the year. I think that's a different kind of urgency, right? And I think it's a different kind of, and I think that can hurt teams too, because you could be a team that's 12-16, right? And sit there and go, well, it's still only May the 9th. Yeah, we got time, but you might run out of time. You might not have the time that you think that you need to get back, okay? You might not have that time. We looked at it last year. I mean, last year's a perfect example. Last year was a team where we looked at that schedule and said, man, this schedule is going to get easy for the Phillies, and the Phillies are going to be able to make a run. And I think they believed that too. I think they looked at that schedule and they said, holy cow, we're playing a bunch of bad teams. We're going to be able to make that run. And so, but leading up to that point, they were very inconsistent, very mediocre, and like, you know, it was like they didn't leave themselves the wiggle room they needed just in case there was error that came against that easier part of the schedule, which was going to happen inevitably. Look, bad teams win 40% of the time, right? I mean, so they didn't leave themselves that wiggle room. And I think when you look at it again this year, you can sit there and say, well, we have time to come back. And of course you do. Of course you have time to come back. But with each additional loss in April and May, that's one less game that you give yourself an opportunity to say, that's a mulligan later in the year. And that, because of that, it's easy to get in that mindset that we have that time, but maybe you don't have that time. And I think, so that's why I think it's real. That's why I don't think it's BS. I think that there is something to it. There is something to urgency, and there's something to avoiding it if you're a player. When you look at the grand scheme of things, that maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you should take each game with a little bit more urgency.
There's no question that the way players look at a season, the way fans or media people look at a season differs. So if you're a player, you know, I have a job to do. Like tonight, win or lose, we're getting on a plane and we're going out to Seattle, and we have another 3 games, and we have to play better. And you just acknowledge that, and you move on, and you go about your routine. And you have a job to do. So I don't think you think about the storylines necessarily the way that people like you and I do, or the way that fans would. But what I do find interesting is I feel like Phillies fans, right? Because it's been so long and there's so much pent-up frustration. It's like, this was supposed to be the year, and you're supposed to be playing better, and you're not, and I'm upset, and are we really going to do this again this season? And it feels like the end of the world if they don't. And for players, it shouldn't feel that way, but I do have a question for you, and I wonder this.
Yeah.
If you go back, and I know that there have been high payroll teams that make a lot of money, that play really well, and they win championships, and so you can't just do a straight equation of dollars to motivation or hunger. But when you watch the Phillies play, they showed up at the park yesterday. Did they want to win 2 games yesterday? If you asked anybody in that clubhouse, hey, you want to get 2 against the Mets today and win this series? Everyone would have said, hell yeah, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just wonder, you bring up, and you can tell me I'm nuts, but I've just wondered this, and I'm not accusing them of this. I'm not saying that this is the reason. But is there something to the fact that this clubhouse is primarily composed of hired guns that are making a lot of money? And just bear with me for 1 second, and then I'll let you either say, yeah, there's something to this, or you can dump all over it. Bryce Harper this season, he's going to pocket $27 million. JT Realmuto, $24 million. Nick Castellanos, $20 million. Kyle Schwarber, $19 million. Aaron Nola's been paid $15.5 million. Gene Segura, he's going to pocket $14.85 million. Let's see, Corey Knebel's a $10 million player. Let me scroll down to the IL here real quick. Zach Wheeler, $26 million. Didi Gregorius, $15.25 million. So we've got a lot of players on this roster that are making 8-figure salaries, none of which have really come up together and rose through the ranks of this farm system, so there's really no cohesiveness in that way. I know that these things are a little bit different, but does the fact that there's not really this like building together, playing together, coming up together, we want to win together, we've got each other's backs, we're going to show that we're the next group that can do this, that's not a part of this equation. And hey, we want to get paid. Let's build our legacies to make sure that we get paid. That variable's not in place for a vast majority of these players. Does that have an impact on what you see and their attitudes and how things play out? Maybe even more so than Joe Girardi.
I think it does, but I think it does in a slightly different manner than the way you outlined it. I think it does, man. I think you're close. But what to me the problem is not necessarily that they're just guys who didn't come here together, and they don't have that connection, and they're making big money already, and so what? I do get the sense watching this team that they like each other, that they want to win with each other, that they have there's a lot of camaraderie in that locker room. I think it's that kind of locker room, and so to me, whether they came up together, which would be great, but the fact that they didn't, I don't think that impacts it so much. What impacts it to me is this. Of all these guys that they've brought in, all these big money players, how many of them have ever won before?
Kyle Schwarber
is the only one, and when you think about it, even the year that he won, he didn't play that whole year. He came back just for the playoffs and World Series.
Right.
And he had a great World Series for the Cubs. But other than that, he wasn't really part of the run. I mean, he was just a guy. I mean, maybe he wasn't hanging out in the clubhouse or whatever, but whatever. But none of them have ever won.
So is that, again, and this goes back to the conversation I had with the player, is this real? Because, I'd like to think that I've been around sports and I know sports, and I'm a believer, again, and I try to disconnect professional sports from youth level, high school level sports. But I do believe that when you win and you figure out how to win tight games, that breeds a confidence that has a rollover effect. In fact, I wholly agree. I'm a true believer in that. If you are young, you've lost, you continue to lose, and you have that one-run lead, you don't know how to drop the hammer and say, I got it this time. You're waiting for something to go wrong. You're waiting to revert back to what you always know. Can that be true on a professional level?
Yes. Yes, it can. And that's the thing. It's like, how many times in sports do you see a team that's should be better but isn't quite better, and then they finally go get that guy or two guys who've won before, they bring it in, changes the clubhouse, changes the locker room, and all of a sudden it makes a difference, and then they go out and they win. And it finally helped this superstar get their championship, finally helped their superstar do what they got to do. It happens nonstop all the time, every sport. It happened here if you go way back to 1980. I mean, that team, think about that Phillies team back then in the 70s. They were good in 75, just missed the playoffs. 76, make the playoffs, get swept. 77, make the playoffs, lose in 4 games. 78, make the playoffs, lose in 4 games. 79, all of a sudden they're like, yeah, we stink now. We're a 500 team. And then they fire the manager, bring in a firebrand and Dallas Green, trade for Pete Rose. And all of a sudden, 1980, they're a world championship team who had a tough road, who barely made it into the playoffs. They had to win a big series against their biggest rival in Montreal at the end of the season, who had to win the toughest 5-game series in the history of baseball against the Houston Astros just to get to the World Series. We're 2-2 in the World Series and had to win a tough Game 5 in Kansas City on the road. Though all those things you had to learn how to do. And think about what, when the 08 team, and think about guys like Rollins and Utley and Howard, all they said is they had to learn how to win. They went through all those years in the early 2000s with Boa as the coach, where they were close and they just couldn't get over the hump and then finally they had to figure it out and learn how to win, and what made that happen. And it was bringing in the right pieces around them. Not necessarily, I don't think they brought in anybody who had really won before, but I mean, they brought in the right kinds of people. Gillick, I guess, was the guy who'd won before. That's who they brought in.
Yeah, and a guy I know Jamie Moore, guy who's been around forever,
sure.
And
right, exactly.
Hey guys,
some veteran.
That's how this goes, and
right, exactly. But they had to learn. But they had to learn.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's a matter of, you could be as talented as you want. You could be the most talented team. Until you learn how to win games and win with consistency and how to overcome adversity, which is another issue, then you're never going to. You're only going to do it sometimes and maybe end up being that 500 team that this team seems to be year in, year out.
Well, what's dangerous now is when you have and you learn how to win. And so now you look at the Mets, right? And we've talked, and I think we have a little bit of a differing opinion on the Mets. I think that they're actually pretty good. You think they stink. And that's fine. We don't need even.
I don't think they stink. I just think that they're. I think it's overblown.
But I will tell you, you start to win games the way that you win on Thursday night. Like, we're looking at this from a Philly-centric viewpoint. You win a game like that, and you start to feel like, yo, we're dangerous. Like, we're never out of it. Like, that is, like, you roll your eyes, but I mean, that's a huge win. I mean, that's a huge win because not only, again, have you beaten the Phillies 2 out of 3, you're now 6-3 against them. It totally changes the tenor of the entire weekend. But, like, we're saying, like, oh, it's getting late early. Like, leaves you less margin for error. What the Mets are doing is setting up a greater margin for error. And, like, I'm sorry, but you win a game like that, and you do feel like, hey, next time we're down 3 in the ninth, we can do this. Like, we're always going to be in it. And whether or not that's true, I don't know. And I'm not telling you that the Mets are going to win 104 games this season, but it's a big win from the Mets' perspective.
Well, no, and I would sound like a hypocrite if I didn't agree with you there, Bob, because that's exactly what I just said that the Phillies don't know how to do, right? And that they have to learn how to do. And so, the Mets doing that, you're right. That does make a difference. That does breed that kind of confidence. Yeah, we can figure this out and we can do it. I just think that their offense is actually not as good as the Phillies.
Right.
When you really look at these games that they played against them, they're not scoring a lot of runs. You had the one big inning, yes, in the 9th inning to come back and win. But even the series that they played last week and a half ago, they didn't really hit the ball well against the Phillies. They just didn't happen. And, they didn't look good. I didn't think they didn't look good against Gibson. Gibson pitched really well against them. You take away 2 Pete Alonso home runs, and what did they do yesterday against a bullpen?
Right.
They didn't hit. They had 2 home runs is what they had. And one of them is a result of, a couple guys got on base for whatever reason or other. But walks were a problem. They weren't great pitch. You weren't facing great pitching. But the fact of the matter is that that lineup does not scare me. And unless DeGrom can come back and beat DeGrom, and then you have DeGrom, Scherzer, Bassett as a top 3 guys in the playoffs. Yeah, and I also don't trust their bullpen. I just don't. I think Diaz is
fine, and that's
smoke
fair,
and mirrors
and that's good. But they do wake up right now 20-10 in first place in the NL East.
Yeah,
so
credit them.
Can only go by what I'm seeing right now.
But Bob, I'm going to say to you right now, it's the same thing. Like if you remember, last year we had these same conversations about the San Francisco Giants, and I said the same thing. I said, well, they're having a good year, and they're probably going to make the playoffs. Are they going to win in the playoffs? I don't think so. I don't see it. Now, granted, they ended up having to play the Dodgers, which was in the first round, which was something that nobody expected, right? I mean, but so that was kind of a little bit different. Maybe they go a little bit further if they don't have to play the Dodgers in the first round. But I don't know. I don't think they would have, the way the Braves were playing last year, would they have beaten the Braves?
I don't know. I mean, they did win 107 games, though, and they're also one of the best teams in the National League again this year. So for, like, purposes of what the Phillies are trying to chase after right now, like, that would probably...
I'm not trying, no, but what I'm saying is, my point is what I'm saying is the Mets remind me a lot of what the Giants were.
Okay.
And are they going to be a playoff team? Probably. Are they going to go anywhere? No.
Listen, I agree.
That's how I feel about it.
Team. I do know that their owner is insane, though, and probably is willing to make come July 31 or August 2 or whatever the trade deadline is this year. He might make that move or two that would send them into, like, oh my God territory. So we'll see. We'll see.
You mean like when the Dodgers? When the Dodgers signed Raul Mondesi?
Right.
I mean, Manny Ramirez.
Right.
I mean,
and I know. Listen, I get it.
I mean,
it doesn't always matter that the best team on paper and all that. But I'm just telling you, man. Like every week, it's like they're getting a little further away, a little further away.
And that's fine.
The Phillies are a team that does not know how to win and has all of these concerns. It's a problem.
And I think that our discussion right now are two mutually exclusive things.
Yes, all right.
Because I agree with you about the Phillies. Right now, it's not good, but at the same time, I'm not sitting there saying.
So what you're telling me is that basically right now it's good to be a Braves fan.
I think that the Braves are still the best team in this division. Yes, I do.
Yeah. Okay.
And I don't think it's close.
Yeah, that's fair. I probably agree with that, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And in fact, I actually would say that part of the reason that the Mets are 20-10 right now is because they've had the benefit of playing the Phillies 9 times.
Well, they're 6-3 against them, right?
So I mean, there you go. That helps. Okay, so, here is a way to then transition into the second game, the most recent game that we had to watch of this team play, just absolutely excruciating baseball. And they come out in Game 2 with a chance to win the series, sweep a doubleheader, something that they had not done in their previous 26 opportunities, I believe. I think what did I read yesterday? It was Corey Seidman said that they've won or they've swept a doubleheader one time out of their last 27 opportunities, which is absolutely insane. So here they come. They have an opportunity to win this game, and they start Christopher Sanchez. And I actually cannot kill the Phillies for starting Christopher Sanchez in Game 2 as the 27th man because you have both Zach Eflin and Zach Wheeler right now on the COVID-related IL. You don't know when you're going to get them back. Joe Girardi, after the game yesterday, said he did think it was possible that you might get both players back at some point on this road trip, but you don't know. So given that, and given that you have to find starting pitching, moving up a guy like Ranger Suarez to throw that game, I know that there is an argument that could be made for it. And the argument is you have to beat the Mets. But if you do that, you're going to leave yourself short at the start of this road trip. So no issue there. I really don't have an issue starting Sanchez.
And let's just break it down really quick, Bob, because if you do move up Sanchez, right? If you do move up Suarez rather than start Sanchez, you can't start Nola Monday.
Right.
He still needs one more day of rest. So Nola can go Tuesday, but now they would have needed a starter for tonight. And you wouldn't have had Sanchez available because he was the 27th man being called up as part of a doubleheader. So now you can only call up somebody that's on your 40-man roster, or you could throw a bullpen game against the Mariners. Then you have Nola Tuesday, but then you don't know what you have Wednesday or Thursday because that's where the gray area is with these guys, with Wheeler and with Eflin. Now,
and you're reasonably hoping that one of these guys is able to come back by the time Wednesday and Thursday rolls around.
Right. And then you maybe only need to have you can recall Bailey Falter by that point.
Right.
Obviously, he wasn't ready to throw. On his day. I mean, they've been stretching him out, to get him to be the sixth starter, so to speak. If one of them can't go, Falter will probably go later this week. But I mean, that's why they had to do it yesterday. And it's not like, oh my God, how stupid, they should have thrown Ranger Suarez. They just couldn't.
I agree.
Because they would have really screwed themselves for this week. And you want to screw yourself for 2 games during the week just to try to win one? I don't think that's a smart play.
So there's 2 things, though, that annoy me after that, okay? And this is – like, here we go. But, like, this didn't take long, right? The fact that they had to start Christopher Sanchez yesterday comes in part because they have absolutely no starting pitching depth. And, boy, didn't we talk about this, like, last week, 2 weeks ago? At some point this season, the Phillies are probably going to need starting pitching depth. And you spend all of this money on offense. And that's great. We were excited. I was excited. I said, oh, my, look at this. You go through this lineup. There's no easy outs. It's going to be great. They're going to pound the ball. and it's going to help offset some of their deficiencies. But now here you are, you enter a spot where you're 12-15, you desperately need a series win, you have a brutal West Coast road trip coming up, you need a win. And the best you can do is use your 27th man, because that's the only thing that makes sense from a roster standpoint. Because you didn't go out and add any starting pitching depth. And we don't have to lament all of the guys that were out there and name names and say, well, this would have been good, that would have worked. But my God, how can the average person sit here in the beginning of April, end of March, and say, I like the Phillies. They better all stay on the field because, God, again, there's no starting pitching depth here. And they hurt them yesterday. And now I don't want to be overly dramatic and say, oh, the Phillies season is in limbo. They're at a fork in the road. But they are 12-16. And if they go out and lose, I don't know, lose 5 out of their next 7, 6 out of their next 7, that's a deficit where you start to say, okay, it's mid-May, but they're not coming back from this. Yeah. And that was their answer to the problem they faced yesterday. And I don't think Dave Dombrowski's a bad GM. I think he's done a lot of good things here, all of that stuff. But holy shit.
Well, I think that he's in a situation where the warts had to be somewhere else. They couldn't be on the Major League roster. The warts were on the Major League roster the last few years, right? I mean, we looked at this Major League roster the last few years and we're like, oh my God, I can't believe that they're trying to win with this lineup. Oh my God, I can't believe that they're trying to win with this bullpen. And they don't have anything in the minor leagues, right? So we know for damn sure that Matt Klentak screwed this team for a long time with the complete failure of the minor league system. So the point is that if you're telling Dombrowski, you got to turn this around, and he comes back to you, John Middleton, and says, well, guess what? The only way I can do this, the only way is I have to improve the Major League roster enough to be able to compete. And that Major League roster, in order to do that, we're going to have to go over the luxury tax to do it. That's the only way I can do it. Otherwise, you're looking at a much longer time because I have to build up the minor league system, which we don't have.
Right.
And so Dombrowski does what he has to do to get a legit 26-man roster that's got depth, that's got major league players on it that you can pretty much rely on. But he still has to hide the warts somewhere. And the warts are they don't have the minor league depth to come up and play. And that's the issue. That's the biggest problem. So what do you do? What do you do?
Well,
I don't know what the solution is.
It's interesting from a roster construction standpoint. So they do the Schwarber deal first, right? Like, that was their guy. Obviously, that was the guy they targeted and wanted the most. At least conventional wisdom would suggest that, because the order of operations began with Kyle Schwarber signing with the Phillies. So forget the fact that he's hitting 211 this morning, and he's been okay. I don't want to be overly negative just for the sake of being overly negative. But the luxury then was Nick Castellanos, who I have to be honest with you, I really like. I'm a big Nick Castellanos guy, and I think he's going to help this team win games, whether it's this year or not, I don't know. But I will say, going out and getting Schwarber and Castellanos kind of, sends them over the tax. And I'm not saying that they could have been in the game for a guy like Carlos Rendon, but 2 years, $44 million, and you're looking at what you're spending on guys like Schwarber and Castellanos, and you go, hey, maybe just one of them would have been okay here, and would a guy like Rendon been more valuable to them? In short-term contract, only 2-year deal. Yes, you're paying $22 a year on a yearly annual value, but like if I could have right now Kyle Schwarber or Carlos Rendon, I'd probably have Carlos Rendon if I'm being honest with you. And that's not to say I don't like Kyle Schwarber. I don't think that there was a need to bring him, to try to fix the leadoff spot, which incidentally he's no longer hitting in. And I got it. I get it. And I don't want to play revisionist history after 28 games because it's so early.
Here's my biggest problem. And yeah, you could do that. You could look at it and hindsight be 20/20 and all that. But I think this is a baseball problem more than it is a Phillies problem, Bob, in a lot of ways. Because we've fallen so in love with having these 8-man bullpens, 9-man bullpen, whatever the hell you want to say it is. We no longer have a long man in baseball. And I think for the longest time, teams would have a guy who would almost basically be your sixth starter, right? Who would be in your bullpen. And, he would come in and throw, 3-4 innings in a game if you're up a lot or you're down a lot, whatever the case might be.
Right,
well, whatever. But then the case would be that, hey, if we need to get somebody into the rotation, that's the guy that we're going to go to. Yeah. And when this team was successful, think back to, again, let's go back to that 2008 team. It was Kyle Kendrick, right? He was never a good pitcher. Let's be realistic. He was never a good pitcher, but he served a purpose.
Right.
He served a role where he kept you in a game for 5 innings and gave you a chance to win. And I think that the sport has just gotten away from that. That doesn't mean that everybody has to, though. That's why I'm saying. So when you're saying I'd rather have Carlos Rodon, well, I don't disagree with you. And in that case, maybe Ranger Suarez is that guy who could rotate back and forth.
And I'm still in on Ranger Suarez. Don't get me wrong here. I'm not trying to throw guys under the bus that don't deserve it. Ranger Suarez, I think, is still a very capable mid-rotation starting pitcher, but wouldn't it be nice to have him in that swing role the way that he was so valuable a year ago? Now, that being said, more so than even the Phillies didn't go out and add another $20 million arm to the rotation, is that there just is nothing. There is no, as you said, the Kyle Kendrick type of guy that you can slot in. Maybe it doesn't require $22 million to build out your rotation depth, but maybe a $5-6 million investment would have been good there. Because instead
I agree.
You get Christopher Sanchez and Nick Nelson 1-2 trying to take home a game that they needed. Although I will say this, and this is interesting, did the manager view that game as a must-win or as a game that they needed? Because after the game, he's asked, and he starts by saying, and I just got to tell you, it blows my mind. He says, well, yeah, anytime you win the first one, the second game is there. Okay. Come on, man. And this goes back to the Joe Girardi conversation. And I know it feels like we're talking in circles, but I'm going to assume that people listening right now haven't listened to the first 5 episodes that we've done. And this is just the latest incident where you say, is that really your mentality post-game? Just do me a favor. And I know that we fell into this trap with Gabe Kapler, but give me a little bit more than that. Say, it's disappointing that we did not win the second game. It would have been big for our team. We needed this one. This team has kicked our ass the first 3 times we've seen it. We had a horrendous, potentially season-defining, one of the worst losses in the history of a terrible franchise 3 days ago. Then we had to sit around on our hands for 2 nights, and we come back and we give you a 1-2 punch of Christopher Sanchez and Nick Nelson. Give me something, man.
Yeah, I guess because Girardi doesn't want to throw it on those 2 guys.
And he shouldn't, because it's not their fault, but Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that's the thing. So he doesn't want to throw it on those, which is why I think he's trying to, he's got to be more disappointed with the lineup, obviously, than those 2 guys.
1 run and 6 hits. 2 extra base hits, and one of them was a meaningless Rhys Hoskins double, and, oh man, can we get to him in a minute?
Well, let's say this, Bob, because here's the thing that really burns me up about the game. Okay, all right, you give up the 2-run homer in the first inning. Okay, fine. Segura hits a solo shot, and it gets you back to 2-1. All right, and so it's 2-1 going into the 5th inning. You're in the game. Sanchez was fine.
Made a mistake to Alonso, and that was it.
And he was fine. Nelson, we don't like. He was the guy who blew up the other night.
Can I just interject? This is a perfect time to say this. I was going to get to it. I promise I'll be quick. Nick Nelson looked at his splits here, and they go back and they tried him out there for the 3rd inning, right? And I was ready to say, well, that was terrible. And he was clearly out of gas, and I think that anybody with eyes kind of saw it. It looked like he was really trying to get him that 1-2 combo through 5 innings and then take his chances late. And I know the offense didn't hit. And I will say this. Joe Girardi manages with the data that's given to him prior to the game. I know it for a fact. He manages in pockets, they call it. He's given statistical matchups. He's given, how many pitches can this guy throw? And Joe Girardi entered that game, no matter what was happening there. He was going through 5 innings there. He was going through that 3rd inning with Nick Nelson. And I'll tell you why. Because if you look at his splits, when he goes 26 to 50 pitches before yesterday's game, he had only given up 1 hit and 1 run entering yesterday's game when he was between 26 and 50 pitches. And so he was entering that inning in the high 20s, went through, I think he ended up with 44 pitches. He went into that saying, I have Nick Nelson for at least 50 pitches in this game. And that's why he sent him back out there. So when he went single walk, he was like, I can still get through 5. I think he has more in his tank. And he's wrong.
Yeah, I would have much rather, in all honesty, I would have much rather gone Sanchez another inning.
Well, this is what I look at. Then you look at the
I don't know what he had. Maybe he was limited, but I would have gone another inning with him, and then going and then I don't know if I would have gone even going to Nelson.
This is what I love, right?
So
then you look at the box score, and you got, and I understand Sanchez has to start the game because he gives you a little bit more length, but you got Brad Hand for $6 million a year throwing a meaningless 8th inning, right?
Yeah.
And then you had Rhys Familia, who didn't throw a you guys are making me crazy, but he didn't throw a pitch yesterday.
Yeah.
Where the hell was he at? You got Nick Nelson in a key spot in the game where he's clearly starting to bleed a little bit in the 5th inning. What are we doing? What are we waiting for on Rhys Familia? Because he used Alvarado and Dominguez in Game 1. Didn't want to bring him back in Game 2. So, hey, again, got to have someone close. And I get it. But, you end up taking your 2 of your highest paid relievers, and they don't touch the ball in a meaningful way in a game that they should have been a little bit more aggressive with. And that is my problem. And in isolation, shit happens. 1 out of 162, mid-May. Injury concerns in the rotation. I get it. But, you got to show me something at some point. And it's just every single game, every single week it feels like. And I feel like these guys are turning me into Angelo Cataldi right now. This is as frustrated I have been watching this team, I think, in 3 years.
Well, let me say this about this, because this is where I really got frustrated. Okay, they give up the home run. Now they're down. Okay, 5-1. It was at that point you knew the game was over.
Yeah. There's no fight. There's nothing.
There was, because that's the thing. There was no desire to come back. I kind of liked their approaches. Game 1. And even early in Game 2, I thought, you had the one, we're going to talk negatively about Rhys Hoskins in a bit, but you saw him take that one swing, where he's not doing the big high leg swing, leg kick now. He's just doing that little step, and he went the other way. It was a foul ball, but he was only fouled by 2 feet, early in the game. That was when they were still in the game, and so before it's 5-1, you have guys trying to go the other way, guys trying to hit the ball up the middle. Alec Boehm had that single that went the opposite way through the shift. There are things that were happening in those in the first game and the first part of the second game, where you say, I like the way that these batters are approaching this, and they'll figure it out. Bassett's a good pitcher. Let's not forget that. He's a good pitcher, and they were trying and doing some things. Then they get down, and it was almost like, forget it. Everything we wanted to do goes out the window. Yeah. They go up there with no approach. They're flailing at pitches. They're swinging at bad pitches. They go 2 for 20 after the second Alonso homer. 2 for 20. Okay? The one is the meaningless double by Hoskins, although it wasn't really that meaningless, because I want to talk about that in just a second.
Get him going. He hit the ball to right field.
Well, no. What I mean was that was the one chance that they actually had to come back and do something in the game, and I think Girardi made a mistake there, and I'll get to that in a second. And the other one was a meaningless single by Segura in the 9th inning. Other than that, that's it. They had no other hits. But I think it was the 6th inning. Hoskins hits the double, and then Segura walks, and then the Mets make a pitching change at this point, which I was a little surprised by, because Bassett has been pitching well. And he goes to Chasen Shreve, to go lefty-lefty against Bryson Stott. You have Camargo on the bench, who could play shortstop, who's a switch hitter, right? Why do you leave Stott in that spot, in a clutch spot where you have runners on base and you're down 4 in the game and have a chance to come back still? You still have 4 bats in this game. You're only down 4 runs at the time. Come on, man. That's a spot where you got to bat for Stott.
Yeah, a guy who has not hit at the major league level this season, a guy who you decided a couple weeks ago when you needed to win games that he was no longer warranted a roster spot, or you didn't have enough confidence in him, I should say, anyway, to play him on a daily basis. So then there you don't make a move there, which is wild. And I agree with you, and it was on my short list of things that made me scratch my head yesterday.
Because if you get the matchup there, and now all of a sudden you got Camargo going against Shreve, that's a good matchup there. Camargo hits lefties. Shreve is not necessarily historically great against righties. He's just okay. So maybe you get a hit there and you get a run. Maybe you only get a run. Maybe you only get 1 run out of it, right? Who knows? Maybe it's only 1 run. But it's now you're all of a sudden you're within 3.
Right.
It changes things.
Make 'em
It changes the way you approach everything.
Sure.
You know?
Totally
the fact is that you don't get anything, and now the 7th, 8th, and 9th, they did nothing. They were just as bad swings as I've seen from some good players. Harper was terrible. Castellanos was terrible, his at bat. I mean, everybody who bats. You could go into real, if you really wanted to, you could go into Real Muto there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, here's the
for a chance at a home run if you really wanted to burn him early, right? I mean, you could have.
It just amazes me, like, when you watch this game, unfold, and you talk about the mid to latter parts of it, but you come out in the first inning, you give up the 2, and then you have an opportunity to tie things up right away. Rhys Hoskins, I think, got like 5 strikes in that at bat and strikes out, and end of inning. And then in the third inning, they actually have a chance. This is the best scoring chance they had the entire game. Schwarber leads off with a single. Alec Boehm kind of reaches on an error. It was a tough play by Davis. He was moving left to, I guess he was moving right to left. And kind of got caught in between. First and second, nobody out. Harper strikes out. Castellanos, I think, hits the ball pretty hard but lines out. And Hoskins comes up again and leaves 2 men on base with 2 outs. And, 4 guys left on base right off the bat. And I come back to Rhys Hoskins and, there's been this thing, and we talked about the Rhys Hoskins, Odubel Herrera, how people, react on Twitter to these 2 guys. It seems like Phillies fans are starting to run out of patience with Rhys Hoskins. And it's intriguing to me. There were a couple people out there yesterday, and what's his name? I think it's Leo Morgenstern had a tweet that people started liking. He writes for, I think, The Good Fight. I always try to give credit where we can. And he puts out WRC plus and OPS dating back to last year, and how Rhys Hoskins, basically, the thesis is still a really good major league hitter, and he's still ultra productive, and let's relax, it's May 9th or whatever. And there are numbers that you can look to with Rhys Hoskins where you say, yep, over time he's shown that he has good plate discipline, he can draw walks, he can drive the baseball, he was on a 40-homer pace last year. I don't think there's ever been a player in my mind that I go back and forth on more than Rhys Hoskins. There are times where I believe those numbers, and I say, yeah, he's a good guy too, so it makes it easy.
Yeah.
Then there are times where I watch him and I just go, I'm sorry, you can't live and die by the streaks that you get with him. And I mean, he has been absolutely abysmal this season. And you look at the numbers as we wake up here after this Mets series, and the man's hitting 189 with a 638 OPS. His last 15 games, he's hitting 155 with a 478 OPS. And I'm sorry, will he have that run where he gets it together and gets hot and we all feel good about him again? Probably. But they've got to get more out of him right now. And
so here's a couple things I want to talk about with Rhys Hoskins. And I'm gonna take you back to an episode we did a couple years ago. To start it off, we had Ruben Amaro on the show. If you remember when we had Ruben on?
Yes.
Okay. And we talked a little bit about, we were talking about the team in general, blah blah blah, and what they could do to get better. And one of the suggestions was, can you move a player like Rhys Hoskins? And Ruben said, well, that would be outside the box thinking. It's not something you would consider, but I mean, right off the cuff, but that would be outside the box thinking about how you can improve the team in another way. And so it was kind of interesting that was the response that we got when we asked him that question. And so when we're sitting here talking about the fact that the Phillies lack the pitching depth, right? And this was something that caught my eye yesterday. Game 1, obviously, Hoskins isn't playing. Did it surprise you a little bit that Boehm was at third and Camargo was at first and not the other way around?
They're plotting something here in the.
Well, I mean, so here's the thing. I mean, I'm just curious because obviously we know Boehm can play first. He's probably, I don't know, is he better at third? Who knows? He's not a great defensive player regardless where you play him. Obviously, Camargo can play all over the infield. We know Real Muto can play first if need be. And you're going to get him off his feet a little bit more. He's played a lot of games.
Yes, yeah.
All right. Because Harper has had a DH so much, Real Muto's caught more than they probably wanted him to. Now you can, if you think about it, is there a market value right now, even though he's hitting as poorly as he is there a potential market value for Rhys Hoskins right now that could get you something that you need, like another starting pitcher, or like a pitcher who at least can, serve in that role and maybe kind of swing back and forth to the bullpen or whatever the case might be? because you have enough guys on your team who can do what Rhys Hoskins already does, and he's got he's a little bit more affordable, right? That he doesn't have a big contract. Is that something you would consider at this point, Bob? If you had to, I mean, you're 12-16, and you're like, what the hell are we going to do? Rather than fire the manager, which everybody says, fire Joe Girardi, and of course that could happen. That could certainly happen, right? If you need to really kind of shake up a room. But would there be no better way to shake up a room than to take a player that everybody likes out of the room?
Well, there could definitely be something said for that. I will agree with that. And as you were talking, I just wanted to kind of go through this very quickly. I mean, the reason you didn't see Rhys Hoskins against Max Scherzer, which you kind of just dismissed, because we all know this, he's terrible against Max Scherzer.
I get that. I
had a look. I just had a look. One for 26.
Yeah. Well, I'm not surprised that was the game. I'm not surprised that's the game he sat.
I agree.
What I'm saying, yeah.
I know what you're saying. And so then I look at it and I go, okay, so Alec Bohm played third yesterday, and Camargo plays first. That's interesting. And I was just curious, because off of that, I'm like, well, why did Bohm play? Was there something they saw? And I mean, he is now 5 for 15 off of Scherzer, but that's after going 2 for 3 yesterday. So like he had anything, notable numbers against him where they'd say, yeah, what the hell, let's roll it out there. Which kind of goes back to your point. Could there be something to that? I don't know, but you're right. I think that there's a very convincing argument to do it, and it's been something I've been talking about for 2 years. I'm a big believer that they should trade Rhys Hoskins, and then people think I'm being mean or that I don't like the guy on a personal level. I believe that this team needs a shake-up. I thought that the Castellanos and Schwarber signings would be the things that do it. Maybe ultimately they proved to be the things that do it. But I don't think that Rhys Hoskins makes a ton of sense as this Phillies roster is currently constructed. And to go back to a conversation that we had 2 weeks ago, he's not going to be here long term. They've committed to Nick Castellanos. They've committed to Kyle Schwarber. They have committed to Bryce Harper. They've committed to JT Realmuto. Rhys Hoskins is not even an average defensive first baseman. They have all of these DHs all over the roster. He's not going to be here. He's not. Yeah.
So to me, if you want to shake up a clubhouse in May, you can fire the manager. Of course, anytime you fire a coach or fire a manager, that always supposedly shakes up the room. But it also gives them an out, right? It's like, oh, well, they fired the manager. It wasn't our fault.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they'll say things right publicly. They'll say, well, yeah, it wasn't Joe's fault. We needed to play better. We got to play better for whoever the new guy is. Right? I mean, of course they're going to say the right things. But the fact of the matter is, when you really look at it, and they're sitting there out quietly in the room, and they're not talking to the media, they're sitting there going, yeah, well, they fired the manager. It wasn't our fault, obviously. So, it's his fault. But you take a guy out of the room who everybody likes, who's been part of this team for so long, and you say, all right, he's going. This is the move that we're making. Now all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, who's next if we don't fix this? Who else? Who could be the next person to go? And I think that kind of has more of an impact with players when they lose a teammate. Somebody that they're going out drinking with or they room with on the road or whatever the case might be. That kind of thing has a greater impact and changes the way guys play far more so than the firing of a coach or a manager does.
Yeah.
And to me, there's no other player right now on this team who you could look at and say, we can move on from him. He has value. It can get us something and would shake up that room. I think it's a perfect storm right now. This would be the move to make. If maybe you don't give it this road trip, right? Maybe give it Seattle, LA, and then if things are still not great after this weekend or after next weekend, maybe that's the move.
Well, it's interesting because right now it's the easy thing to say because he's playing so poorly. Whereas a month ago we would have said if you can get something for Alec Bohm, you do that deal because he's terrible defensively and he's not hitting and he's just a mess. And now here's Alec Bohm putting together a really strong 2022, and whereas he was tied to, we know this for a fact, was tied to trade rumors in March, because I think that the fact that they even had those conversations is an acknowledgement of this roster isn't settled. This is not the finished product of this roster. It's not the ideal makeup of a roster, and they know it.
Right.
And the fact that they talked about Boehm, I think would let you know that. It indicates it. So now, fast forward a month, and you start to say, like, well, could it be Hoskins? And so if you're a Phillies fan right now, and you're listening to this, and you're like, stop, come on, Rhys. It's Rhys. He's a centerpiece of the organization. Like, I'm not so sure about that. And, maybe the Phillies ultimately end up trading Boehm. But, like, when I say, like, he's not going to be here, Hoskins, well, I can tell you right now, with those signings that they've made, the guys I mentioned, Real Muto, the corner outfielders, or, the DHs that they signed this offseason, Hoskins and Boehm, they're not going to both be on this team come 2024. They're not. They're just not. So maybe get out ahead of it because it's not working right now and do something about it.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe you look to find some, maybe you look to work somewhere with another team that's struggling that maybe they didn't think they were going to be struggling.
So
maybe you look like maybe you look at somewhere like Boston, for example.
Yeah, what a mess! What a mess that has been. Probably the only bigger surprise than really the Phillies at this point is in terms of teams with some expectations not playing well. It's the Red Sox, 10-19. They've been terrible. Hey, now listen, just for the sake of kind of keeping it within an hour, which we've now just pushed over as I look at the clock.
Yeah, I know, right?
You got 3 on the road here with the Mariners, and then you have obviously the 4 with the Dodgers, and you can't expect that to go particularly well, at least the Dodgers series. Now, here's the thing with the Mariners: they got off to a pretty good start this season, but they're 2-8 in their last 10 games. They're still 8-5 at home. 2 things that I would say the Mariners are not a great baseball team. I've never really had them pegged as a true contender or anything of that nature, but the Phillies have to go out west. They have to play a team that is still over 500 at home. And the Phillies, since Joe Girardi has been the manager of this team, are 47-72 on the road, as I pointed out on Twitter after the game last night. And they're, I actually triple checked it just to make sure I was doing my math correctly. So yes, they are 25 games under 500 under Joe Girardi on the road. So I cannot, with any conviction or confidence, say that the Phillies are going to go out and turn it around against the Mariners this week. They might. But when you consider their starting pitching instability, some of the question marks they have, the fact that they've just played with a general lack of anything now for 28 games, I don't feel great about it. How do you feel?
Yeah, well, I mean, can you feel great about anything with this team right now? I mean, you really can't. I mean, if you want to try and take the optimistic view is you're going up against a team that can't hit. They can't hit. I mean, they got Ty France is like the one guy that hits. And Crawford, J.P. Crawford's having a great start to his season. But other than that, there's nobody in their lineup that hits. No one. They got 2 young kids who are going to be stars down the road who are really struggling early. That's Julio Rodriguez and Jared Kelenic. They've both been struggling there. The guys they picked up from the Reds have been a disaster so far, and Winker and Suarez. They don't have players. I mean, they just don't have a lineup. Their lineup is bad. So you have to be able to hit against their pitching, they have good pitching. Right, so you got Robbie Ray and Logan Gilbert, and Flexen pitched a nice game the other day. Marco Gonzalez. I mean, I don't know who. I haven't looked at who the actual pitching matchups are, but those are the pitchers that you're probably going to face. At least 3 of those guys, right? You have to be able to find a way to hit those guys. And if you can hit their starting pitching and you can get out on this team, there's no reason you can't win 2 or 3 in Seattle or all 3 in Seattle. There's no reason you can't. But then again, I sat here a week ago and said there's no reason you can't win both games against Texas at home.
You're actually getting what I would consider to be basically the Mariners' best shot. You're going to get Flexen tonight, who's been pretty good, even though he's 1-4. Robbie Ray has been very average, but he's a dangerous pitcher. He can strike some guys out, and then you get Logan Gilbert, who's been awesome on Wednesday. So it's not an easy setup at the very least. I think would be fair to say, and. Then you go out and you look ahead and you say, well, you got to deal with the Dodgers. And I don't have to explain to you that the Dodgers are good, but when you then see that they have a plus 74 run differential, which is, I think, better than any other team, the second best team by 24 runs this season.
Right.
I think number 2 is the Yankees. Yeah. So even there, they're still 26 runs ahead of them in run differential. They're 10-2 at home. And they've won 7 out of their last 3, and they're 19-7 overall, and the Phillies can't win on the road. So that is all to kind of make the point that now here they are sitting at 12-16. They have 7 games out west. I will tell you that if I were a betting man, I would take them to go 2-5. I think that's where I'm at this morning. The
one thing I will say though is this with the Dodgers. is at least you're throwing your pitchers that have been pitching well. Assuming Wheeler can get back by the weekend. I mean, look. COVID. The COVID list. I mean, what
I know.
What is COVID anymore? It's 5 days, right? I mean, it's not. It's not like it's something ridiculous. So if you assume you can get Wheeler back for one of the games against the Dodgers, you're going to be able to throw.
You're right.
Nola, Wheeler, Gibson,
and as I pointed out at the beginning of the show, they don't win when those guys pitch. So
I know, but at least gives you a chance. So you're not going to sit there and say, well, they're going to go 2-5.
I get it. They're not going.
They have a better chance to
Eflin, sixth starter. I get your point.
Yeah.
You're right.
So to me they have a better chance. They have a better chance of splitting that series than they otherwise would have. Right?
I'm with you.
That's how I look at it. So that's why I look at it and I say, okay, you're going to play them. They're going to the next 7 games on this road trip: 3 in Seattle, 4 in the Dodgers. If you go 4-3, you're good.
Yeah, if you go 4-3, oh my God, you'd have to be to the moon if they go 4-3. I think that
that's what I think it has to be.
I think if you look at this though, I mean, if you had to bet on this, if odds were set, would they finish plus or under 500 over the next 7 games? You probably have to take under, or at least under would be the favored line, right?
Under would be the favorite. Yes, it would be the favorite.
Let's just say, for the sake of argument, it plays out that way, just to project ahead here. If they go 3-4 over the next 7 games, you're looking at 15-20 when you wake up next Monday morning, and if it's worse than that, you're looking at 14-21.
21. Yeah.
I mean, oh my God.
Yeah, you can't have it. You can't have it. No, it can't be that way, Bob.
That's what happens when you lose, 2 out of 3 to the Mets and get swept by the Rangers in a 2-game set. You knew that this was going to be a tough week, which has since gotten tougher because of the starting pitching uncertainty, and you've left yourself very little wiggle room, and that is the reality of the 2022 Phillies right now. And we can all sit here and say, like, they'll hit better and the ball will probably change. And when it gets warmer out, the strength of the team will be more pronounced. And I think that that's all reasonable. But unfortunately, they are digging themselves a hole right now where even if those things happen, you start to say, like, it doesn't matter. And I can't believe that, you're sitting here in May kind of going, like, this team is trending towards holy crap, territory. And don't tell me about the 2019 Nationals and their 19-29 start. Like, there have been more teams that have started 19-29 that have gone on to do absolutely nothing than there have been that have turned it around and flipped the switch and went on crazy win streaks. And, oh, by the way, the Phillies have never shown any ability whatsoever to do that outside of last summer for like 10 minutes.
Yeah. No, you're 100% correct.
So that's
you are 100% correct.
Well, it's early. People are panicking. Like, to be honest with you, like, I've watched plenty of baseball. I cover it professionally. I think if you're a Phillies fan this morning and you're like, oh shit, you're entitled to feel like, oh shit.
Yeah, you should. You should, but but you have to. Yeah, at the same time, you can't just you can't just say. And this is gonna lead into my one last thing, which is actually ties into Philadelphia. Usually it doesn't, but today it does. And I finally had enough, and I'll explain what it is in a minute. But you can't. You're right. You can be oh shit, but I don't think you can sit there and be like, well, it's all over.
No, I'm not saying cancel the season, but I do think you're not being pessimistic by taking a realistic approach at this and a realistic look at this.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
no, you're 100% right, and I do not disagree with you at all on that. You absolutely can take a pessimistic view of it. You can be concerned. You should be concerned, but at the same time, it's not time to completely panic yet.
I'm with you.
That's all I'm saying.
I'm with you.
Here's my one last thing in that vein. I've had enough of Michael Barkan.
This is Bob, my guy,
I've had enough. And look, I know Michael. Okay? Michael is a great guy.
That's what I've heard.
He really is.
I've been told.
He's a phenomenal human being. He's a wonderful person. I've had enough of his shtick on TV. I get more mad at Michael Barkan after a game than I do at anything that happened with the Phillies.
Wait, and it's because would it be better if I hold this bat in my hand and give you my analysis of the game?
But it's not. It's
Do I
not
look
that.
like I know what I'm talking about now because I'm holding this bat?
Look. The analysts are what they are, right? I mean, Ricky Boza got his shtick, and I like Ruben the best of all of them, and a lot of people don't like Ruben, but I think Ruben's the most honest of everybody. If you know, and I do like when they throw it to Kruk when he's in the booth. I think Kruk's pretty honest when he's in the booth as well. Ben Davis is just kind of milquetoast to me, but Barkan is it's one extreme or the other. There cannot be any analysis, any questions that are geared to these guys, and he's the guy that's running the program, and that's why I get pissed off, because you should take each game for what it is. And so to sit there and say, you know, oh, this is a great win, this is exactly what they needed, this is fantastic, Ricky Bo, how awesome is this? Well, it's not necessarily awesome. It was a win. You know, oh, this is the most terrible loss ever. This team stinks. They're falling out of the wild card. He was talking about the wild card race the other day. Yeah, the freaking wild card race, Bob. It's May. There's more teams going to be in the wild card this year than ever before, with the exception of 2020, obviously because of the shortened season. But I mean,
and there were like 12 and 13 at the time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like, I mean, you kidding me? We can't start talking about the wild card. I mean, come on, man. I mean, let's just. Well, Can we just break it down? Can we have a real conversation about the game? We can look at the positives. We can look at the negatives. Whatever you want, that's fine. But we don't need it to be the life or death, you know, angle to every frigging game. It drives me insane.
I totally agree with you. I've often called the show Phillies Fake Outrage Live. Which I've also called it Sixers Fake Outrage Live. Although Amy Fadul's the host of that show and does a good job with it. Doesn't bring that same insanity. But the Eagles, it's what you're talking about, but on steroids. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. Every loss is just an indictment of the franchise, whereas every win is like, here come the Eagles to win the Super Bowl. And over 162, it's nauseating to watch, and I totally agree with you. And I've been critical of him on Twitter because it's been my experience. Last year, a couple times, there were things that I had tweeted that like just happened to come out of his mouth or like his Twitter account like moments later, and I just found it to be almost a statistical impossibility that we were just both on the same wavelength like that. But different story. I'm with you. I do feel a little bit of I'm contradicting myself or being hypocritical if I just basically told you this team is in a lot of trouble. So for me to then pounce on him for doing the same thing, it's kind of a weird look, but I will tell you that he does it every game, all the time. Game 3, game 105, game 142, it's the same thing over and over again. And he's a smart guy and he knows sports. And I much like Angelo Cataldi, I suspect he knows exactly what he's doing.
Oh, of course he does. Of course he knows what he's doing. Of course, and that's what frustrates me even more. And that's why I said to you, that's why I started it off with, you know, I know Michael, and I think he's
Newhouse, journalistic, and
and I think he's a great guy. And I think if you go back over his career, he's done some great stuff. And he used to be like, he was never like this. Do you remember when Daily News Live was on?
Sure, he's great,
and he was the host of that, right?
Loved him.
You know that back then. He was a facilitator.
Yeah, and
he basically let the other people who were on the show kind of dictate the emotion of the conversation.
Would challenge when needed, would follow up when needed. He was great. It was a great show. Growing up, really, that was, if you wanted to be in Philadelphia sports media, you know, probably one of the reasons you wanted to was because you watched those guys talk on that show and said, this is awesome. You know?
Yeah. So we know he can do it. We know he's good at that. So the question is, and maybe it's not, and this is why I'm not talking directly to Michael to fix it. I'm talking to NBC to fix it, because I think this is a directive from above them. That this is what NBC wants. NBC thinks that everybody wants to watch the talking heads like the Stephen A's and those guys, and that they want that on a game by game basis. And I don't necessarily think that's the case.
I'm with you, but then I watched it last night, and I rarely do, and so maybe I'm wrong about this, but I did watch the post game show for 10 minutes last night on the Sixers. I don't know if it's just the personnel on the set just can't kick into that panic mode gear all the time. But the Sixers show doesn't really do that. The Eagles one, oh my God. And then the Phillies, it's more ridiculous with the Phillies because there's 6 games a week. Because we're in April and May. That being said, like, you know, you can be critical and you should be. And like sometimes Ricky Bell, like after the game on Thursday night, people were like, I can't wait to see Ricky Bell. And like, hell yeah, man. Like there's a time and place to, you watch a team go for game after game, there's a time and place to just rip them to shreds. There is.
Well, but I'll tell you, as someone...
That end of the world, sky is falling thing after every single game.
No, you're right.
Off to get
right.
that level.
And here's where I'll give Ricky Bo a little bit of credit. And Friday night, I think, was a perfect example. Okay, he was critical and he was a little scorched earth and everything like that, how horrible the loss it was, whatever. But he did offer a perspective that no one else would offer, and I felt was fair. And he said, "I have no problem with going to a guy like Nelson in that spot in the bullpen, because every manager in baseball is going to want to save their guys. They have 3 more games in the series, right, coming up against a big series. You don't want to burn your closer. You don't want to burn your setup guys. You want to go with someone further down the food chain in the bullpen to try and get you through a 6-run lead in the 9th inning. Every manager in baseball will do the same thing." And he said, and I've been in Corey Knievel's spot before where the guy does not do the job in front of you. You've already shut it down. You're the closer. You've probably already shut it down for the night mentally.
Right.
You're not going into this game. And then all of a sudden you got to get ready and you've got to warm up and you're just not prepared because you've already shut it down mentally. You've won the game 7-1. It's going to be over in 10 minutes. So you're not ready. And so when Knievel comes in and Knievel gets hit, it's because he's just not prepared for it, because he's not ready. Because and Ricky Bo's explaining this. So he's giving you good, valuable information as to why you can't necessarily blame the manager, or you can't necessarily blame the closer for blowing it in that spot, but at the same time saying you can't lose this game.
Right.
So, you know what I'm saying? Like he's putting it on the group effort, saying you just can't let it happen, but at the same time understands why it did and why it happened with the people that it was.
Yeah, well, you get no argument for me on that. I mean, I like, and listen, wrap that up by saying, like, I agree with you. I like Ricky Bo too. Like, he brings ultimately the show is for the fans, and the fans want to throw the remote through the television at the end of the night. And so you want, unlike your manager, you want to see a little anger. You want to see someone say, yeah, that sucked, and you should be upset, and it resonates with the viewer. But when it's every single night, it becomes disingenuous, and therein lies the problem with the show.
That's the job of an analyst, not the job of the host. Yeah. And that's why I have a problem with Barkan being that way. Yeah. That's just me.
Well, there you go. It's not just you, actually. So I'll say that. And on that note, we will close it down, and we will be back later this week once the Phillies wrap up. I guess with the Mariners, and then just depending on schedules, it'll either be a Thursday show or a Friday show. So we will be back one more time before the Phillies wrap up this West Coast swing. Important week, as they all are when you are 12-16 now for the Phillies, and we'll see if they can kind of stabilize this thing moving forward. Either way, we will be back soon, and we will talk to you then. Make sure that you're following podcasts on Spotify, Apple Music, anywhere else that you get your podcasts. Check us out on YouTube as well, where this show will be, and we will talk to you guys later this week.